Hey everyone, it's Lindsay, the Go Live Girl. We are here at KZYX in Philo, California, also known as the Anderson Valley. I'm here with Alex Aragon, Doug Livingston. You've just been doing the show for a couple years now, right?
Almost 20 now.
Just almost 20. So I'm going to put my headsets on, hand this phone to my husband, and we are doing the live stream.
Hey, everybody.
And you're listening to that here on KZYX Philo 90.7 FM, KZYZ Willits and Ukiah 91.5, and Fort Bragg at 88.1. Stay tuned for the Renewable Energy Hour coming up next. We've got Alex in the house for the first time, and our guest to be interviewed also in the house. Usually we're what do you call it? Commuting by electron. Good evening, Mendonesia. This is Doug Livingston, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, Alex Aragon, but this time I'm joined in person, able to look at across the microphone.
In the studio. Hey, Doug.
Yeah, you made the evil
buttons and switches.
Buttons and switches.
Let's see what can go wrong tonight.
You know you're a tech guy if you get excited about buttons and switches.
Oh, yeah. This is geek paradise here.
So you brought some guests?
I did. I brought Lindsay Wood, also known as Betty Biodiesel. I first met Lindsay back at Soulfest and also at the Health and Harmony Fair back around 2003. She was this amazing person who would show up with this big old bus with a huge red stripe on it and an entourage of people who wanted to be her or be as cool as she was, which never could come close at the time. She had this amazing bus that she was living in with all her accoutrements and traveling around, fired entirely on biodiesel and oils. Basically, no war required. No money going to Saudi Arabia or Texas even to power her abode as it went up and down the coastline and out places east of here and Arizona, Nevada, all kinds of different places.
Did you do recycled deep fat fryer grease?
Or, yeah. I got some stories.
If any of you remember Betty Biodiesel from various festivals, she always had a big sunflower costume on.
Yes.
Green, amazing glory.
I remember that sunflower.
Pioneers, we got Soulfest, Earth Dance, Harmony Festival. Those are my faves.
Yeah, taking the tour of her bus though, and walking around in there, seeing, wow, this is really doable. You can really do this without burning petroleum. It was an amazing thing back then. So, what got you into that? Like, how did you know that you didn't want to burn diesel and you could do this?
I would say in 2001, I was talking with someone about, hey, I want to get a Prius and save energy. And they said, well, that still drives on petroleum. And that word sort of reverberated in my brain. Like, what do you mean petroleum? And it was Pioneers 2001 when this guy, Jason, was the only guy on the lot. Now they've got all kinds of art exhibits out there. He was showcasing his Vanagon driving on veggie oil. And I thought that was just the coolest thing, that you could take something from a fryer pit and put it in your car, obviously with some tweaking and some filtering, and then drive around with it. So I said, sign me up, let's do it. And we started, I actually looked for a Vanagon, found one, and we started converting it to veggie oil.
Is it Joshua?
Josh Tickell came in a little bit later, okay. But Jason was more of the local guy, and Josh was definitely doing the veggie van tour at that time.
Oh, yeah. We real good sponsored them. I used to work for them at the time.
So this was a real amazing thing, though, at the day to do that. I mean, this was right after, the Gulf War and war in Iraq and all that. And, lots of activism, lots of people really wanting to change the world for the better as much as they could. And, you would go about and you make this thing happen. It seemed like just this impossible task to get off of petroleum. When you started doing it yourself, were you making your own biodiesel yourself?
I was not that industrious, but definitely there were some really cool people. In fact, there was a van full of ladies that drove around the country. There's a movie or a documentary of them made. But no, at the time, we started gathering the tribes, gathering other people that were like-minded, creating the veggie oil co-op out of Ocean Song Farm out in Sebastopol.
Sebastopol, yeah.
Sorry, not Ocean Song, excuse me. It was... I'm blanking on that. Anyway, it was in Sebastopol, Veggie Oil Co-op. And then we also started the biodiesel co-op. So for those that were just driving on diesel and didn't have a conversion on veggie oil, they would be running on biodiesel. And that was housed at the new college there in Santa Rosa. And then for those that wanted to really go a little bit further and just drive on straight vegetable oil, there was the veggie oil. It's called SVO.
We all know this stuff too well, but you should probably explain the distinction for people who aren't familiar with vegetable oil-based fuels. What's the difference between driving on oil versus driving on biodiesel?
Absolutely. So the base, of course, for both of them is a vegetable oil. With biodiesel, what you're going to do is you're going to add some lye and some caustic material and methanol. What that does is it interacts and it drops away the heavier, fattier oil part. And it gives you something that the makeup that's similar to a diesel fuel. A little different. I'm sure there's some scientists out there like just a little different, but enough so where the footprint, you could put that into your diesel van. Mercedes were the biggest, users of that. I had a 85 Volkswagen Vanagon. Love those things. They only made diesels in a certain year. So I would drive my car on biodiesel, warm up the engine that would then have coils around the veggie oil. So it would warm up the veggie oil. And then I would switch a little button. That was the biggest thing. This little button that you switched, or I'd say toggle. And all of a sudden it's driving on veggie oil. And the only thing you had to remember as a human being is about a mile out to switch it back to biodiesel so it would fuel, run the biodiesel.
How many
in your car.
times did you forget?
One time I literally had to wait for it to warm up so I could actually drive my car.
Yeah.
So yes, I did make those mistakes.
So the biodiesel you can drive straight on, but it's been somewhat processed.
Yes, absolutely.
And a whole bunch of glycerin as the byproduct.
Yes, definitely.
So at first people were making this themselves, and then the co-op started happening and started to become available in different places. That was kind of localized in different areas. In Ukiah, of course, we had Yokeo Biofuels, which Doug is very familiar with.
And I think one of the other, like Eel River Fuels, delivers virgin biodiesel.
Eventually, I even worked for Bentley Biofuels. They started building a convenience store. So it was Bentley Biofuels. It was Yokeo Biofuels. There were some other larger organizations, but those were largely the local providers of this biodiesel. And there was a group of us running around with B100 stickers or buttons on our shirt. We were the purists. We were the ones that were like, we're going to put 100%.
B100 being 100% biodiesel.
100% biodiesel.
No mix with petrol, diesel.
Right.
So these were like small co-ops and stuff where people are doing this and setting them up, being small refineries basically of
absolutely
making biodiesel.
And in fact, you can track it that even in LA, the co-ops would start, and wherever they were started and had a massive amount of people, there would be a station dropping in quickly after that. So it really was growing. It was growing like crazy. There were stations growing up. There were all those things happening.
What sort of things got in the way of making it happen?
The tax incentives. It was like a yo-yo. So when that first happened, life was great. Fuel costs were about on par with diesel. There were sometimes it even dipped below, and it was like the big moment of cheer, like, yay, we did it. And then it would go up a little bit. So it was always like buying organic food, at Whole Foods. You pay a little bit more. But we were okay with that. And at that point, I shifted from the Vanagon to a little VW Beetle, the diesel Beetle. So I drove around with a little bio Beetle. I had the vanity plates, the whole deal, and would drive with biodiesel straight in that engine for a long time, a lot of miles, all over the country, actually. So I was able to go from California over to Colorado, all the way to Iowa, fueling up on biodiesel all across the country.
B100, were you able to find?
Not B100. You'd find a lot of B20. So 20% blend was more the, at that time, it was like, what is it, 300 billion or just a million gallons of diesel were being consumed. So the fact that we would take over all of that with 100% was not realistic. But the fact that we could even get to B5 would mean like an entire industry would be growing. Exactly, coming into existence.
So a big part of your focus was the activism, trying to get it out there that, hey, look, this could actually happen. And you were actually demonstrating it could actually, work. Then what kind of other activism did you do? Who were you trying to convince? Who are you talking to besides the choir,
We were talking to the choir, but I always love saying this, like, the choir in churches, they meet weekly. They actually practice. So the point is, let's gather some people, let's keep practicing, and then your tribe grows, the choir grows. And, I want to give it up to the women at Biofuel Oasis, still to this day, a station in Berkeley pumping out biofuels, doing the chicken thing. They've got, just all kinds of workshops that people want to tap into. So they are still going strong, while a lot of us around, the company I work for, Blue Sky Biofuels, came and went into another organization. On the East Coast and the West Coast, the veggie oil was the only option. For a little bit there, we thought we were going to be trucking a bunch of soybean across the country, and then the futures market was so volatile that it just turned into it's the veggie oil day. So now all of a sudden restaurants that had to pay for fryer oil to get rid of, now we're being paid, or at least not having to pay for oil to be get rid of. So then that went into the biofuels making process. And so really it took everyone. It took a lot of us going to the National Biodiesel Conference. It was groups of us. It was like Josh Tickell doing his veggie van. It was cooperatives all over the country. It was the small producers like Yokeo Biofuels and ones on the East Coast. It was just a whole amazing community. And then the tax subsidy kind of ripped the wind out of our sail. And there were some hanger-oners.
What was it? It was about $1 a gallon?
Yes, it was $1. And so now all of imagine paying $1 more. Yeah.
Where did those funds come from, the $1 a gallon?
That was at government level, tax subsidy. Federal. Yeah, federal level.
Federal level. And that was available to any producer of biofuel?
Yep, so absolutely.
Biodiesels or the biofuels or ethanol and such.
Ethanol was starting to take steam. I know when I worked at the biofuel station in Bentley in Minden, the coolest thing about that place was that there was no 100% petroleum available at that station. Huh. It was either I think it was B5, B20, B100, or it was E85. So there's never an option of just a straight petroleum product, either gas or diesel.
So when the incentives, the tax credits, they started becoming unreliable, what was happening with that?
Yeah, so the yo-yo effect. The first time they just stopped. Yeah, and then it came back. But you take away something, even if that it had some hesitation or moments. We're only talking it was in play for like maybe a year or two. You can't put a 5-year budget or a plan or go out to investors and get the support you need.
So as reliable as politics.
Exactly. Especially what's going on nowadays.
Yeah, well, nowadays there's actually the Trump administration, who isn't that into watching out for global warming and all these kind of things. They actually have upped the incentives for doing biofuels lately as part of the Farm Bill. A couple of curious things about that are the soybean market has taken a big hit because of the trade issues going on with China. There's a place,
Trump induced.
They need to have somewhere to sell their soybeans and the different biofuel crops. One of the big beneficiaries of the Farm Bill is Iowa. Yeah. And Iowa is a really important
critical state for politics, right?
So it's kind of interesting to hear Chuck Grassley, the GOP Senator Chuck Grassley, talking about biofuels. He sounds like he's on a Green Party almost when he starts talking about that, the benefits of it, how great it is for our economy and for the environment even. So it's kind of come full circle. It is mainstream. But it seems that some of the incentives now, they aren't really going for B100. They aren't trying to get these small producers to do it. They're actually the big producers, big refineries have actually got these mandates that say their fuel has to have lowered amounts of carbon content and different pollutants that would be in it within it. And one of the easiest ways for them to get those to hit those targets is by adding more biofuels to their mixes, both in diesel, also in gasoline mixes. So by adding a little bit, basically incentives are set up so that by 2030, I don't remember the exact dates, but they have to keep on decreasing their pollutants in the fuel. Each year they have to do a little bit more. So each year they're looking at different ways to get their fuel mix be a little bit better with some of the different biofuels. So there's a market for it, but it's not being focused for the B100. It's kind of industry wide. So although it hasn't, we don't have B100 at every station, we still have overall the fuel supply in the United States is actually getting a little bit cleaner with the addition of biofuels. Mm-hmm. So although it's not what we envisioned, I wanted to see, there's a time when I wanted to see all these cars driving on 100%.
No, we never really established that for newbies. What makes biodiesel better?
Oh, they're definitely better because they come from a plant source. They don't come from the billions and billions of years that it took to compress the petroleum. And that's what has so much potency, obviously, for petroleum, but it also carries a wallop of pollutants, noxious gases, carbon, emissions that are creating climate change.
Yeah,
so
it's the carbon emissions one that worries me the most.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You can burn it cleanly if you do the right equipment, but even the cleanest burn produces a ton of carbon dioxide. And when you burn biodiesel, you also produce a ton of carbon dioxide, but that carbon dioxide was just in the atmosphere the year before when that soybean plant or whatever it was pulled that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And so it's part of an active carbon cycle as opposed to 300 million year old deposited carbon.
And as Betty Biodiesel, I went into numerous schools and talked about the carbon life cycle. I did my dressed up as a big sunflower and hosted these, wonderful, darling children that really got that you don't want to cut down the trees because the trees are helping with all the pollutants and emissions. And so, they got it.
Well, this is part of your particular campaign, though, to get so there'd actually be more biofuels in school buses.
Yes.
It wasn't just the exhausts going out into the overall atmosphere and global warming. It's also for health reasons.
Absolutely. In fact, my Green MBA program, I was one of the first graduates of the Green MBA program that launched at New College and then landed at Dominican and now is no longer. 300 of us are a little orphaned out there in the Green MBA program. But my thesis was all about biofuels for schools. So putting biodiesel in school bus was a really smart thing. After 5 research studies, they figured that these are leaky units. These are leaky vehicles. And so buses are, the buses, the actual school bus, not a coach like a Greyhound or something, which I actually lived in. That was my big red bus. It was an old MCI tour coach, but the schoolies are very leaky. And so their recommendations is put the kids up front with the windows down. That was their recommendation. So I thought, well, maybe biodiesel could help these children that have no choice, obviously, but to be in a school bus for back and forth. They even tracked kids over a certain number of years that would ride the school bus were X% more times likely to get cancer.
Or asthma. Or
any of the other things. Yeah.
I remember from my Kumar conversation days, biodiesel was, essentially zero on the carbon dioxide emissions front because of the active carbon cycle argument. It was pretty comparable on the nitrous oxides. So,
that was always the one that got the big kind of poke. If anything, biodiesel's
that was the only thing.
It was the only thing that was a little higher.
But it was incredibly lower on the small particulates and incredibly lower on the polyaromatic hydrocarbons. The small particulates probably affecting the asthma and the polyaromatic hydrocarbons doing the
cardiovascular issues. Yes, all of those.
So did the bus program take traction?
It didn't, when the tax subsidies, you're dealing with a school system that is not going to be playing to, I'm just going to pay more for my biodiesel. But there were some schools that I was working with that were very active. They knew what was going on inside the school buses. And so they did put in biodiesel. And then, of course, when the tax subsidies went away, they could no longer keep that. Yeah. And that led me to my discovery of LED lighting when I said, what industry is out there that won't have such a fluctuating, volatile experience that will be here for the long haul and will still play into my world of sustainability.
LEDs.
LEDs, woo!
Nice and cool and good efficient lighting. They were kind of harsh at first, though.
Oh, yeah.
The blue. Oh, well, actually, they were always a better color rendering index than any fluorescent. Meaning they had a more balance, they had more of all the different wavelengths instead of concentrations of a couple. But they were always, the early white ones were always so blue. And people associate that with the worst of the fluorescents, which were like 2-phosphor, ghostly blue tubes that hummed.
Yes, the humming. Oh gosh, the T12s. And one thing about the LEDs is they are still blue. It's called a blue pump that shines light through a phosphor. It's literally called doping. I know we're in Mendocino County. We're not talking about cannabis here.
We talk about doping in this show, and we're not talking about pot. We're talking about, phosphorus and boron. The stuff in the PV semiconductor. They dope the silicon is the terminology.
So the early days of LEDs going mainstream for lighting, what was that? Last 2006, 2007, maybe even a little later even.
I entered it 2000. Why is my mind blanking on this? 2010. Actually, yeah, 2010. So 7, 8, they were definitely doing their thing, but I'm sure glad I did not enter it then because people weren't ready. I remember my first bulb was a 40-watt equivalent. It was $20. And when I say the word power factor, what that means is like dirty energy. It's like, just for anyone listening out there, it never held quite the promise of, it's a 15 watt, because when you add the power factor in there, it's really more like 20 something watts. And it was dim. It didn't last a long time. It had its issues, just like any technology did. But the good news,
it was AC.
Yes, AC.
Because we saw LEDs 10 years before that, actually coming out of, I believe it was Petaluma. Holly Solar Products carried some of the first white LEDs in the U.S.
That actually is I think the same company, Petaluma, was the one that I got aware of and said, okay, this might be my thing.
He was aiming at the off-grid battery-operated world, so he had 12 and 24 volt units but they didn't have to have the crazy electronics you need to get from the AC to the DC, and that's what failed. It wasn't the LEDs, it was the electronics.
Delivery.
The AC conversion.
Uh-huh.
I remember being really stoked when I found a really good high quality Philips bulb, LED light
for
bulb.
$9.
$30 was
Yeah,
the first
$30.
time. And actually, I was admiring it so well that the electrical supply house I was checking out was, you can have that one. I was like, oh wow, it was my new toy. I'd bring it in, I'd plug it in people's houses to show them, look how much less energy you can use with this bulb. Yeah, how much does it cost? $30. Well, it could make sense for people who are off grid.
When we were selling compact fluorescents in the late 90s, they were $20 a bulb. That was standard price.
So what's interesting is the LED industry learned from the compact fluorescent world because there was a lot of over promises that happened. This is going to last X amount of time, then it didn't. So when the LED industry came out, or at least I shouldn't say the industry, the lighting industry, got the LED technology, and now they're trying to wrap their heads around how to put this out. Well, the Design Lights Consortium is a group that you had to have the DLC certification to make sure that your product was legit, that you wouldn't be having failures and all kinds of stuff. Now, LEDs still had their failures and still had their things, but
below a certain percentage.
Yeah, and it at least had a little bit of history, or at least they learned from the lessons of the compact fluorescent, and applied them. But what's funny, I got a fun story. $90 fluorescent tubes, $90 LED tubes to replace the 32-watt fluorescent. They were 18 watts, $90. And the store that bought them was a grocery store that was so tired of going up on their scissor lift to change out their lights, he was willing to pay $50,000, 7-year financing, because they were going to last more like 10 or 12. It wasn't going to be a huge amount more, But he was just so excited he would not have to get on that scissor lift.
So to him, the labor of changing light bulbs, maintenance was the issue.
That was the issue.
That was one of the early special markets for LEDs was, suspension bridge decoration and stuff like that, where the cost of replacing the light would be nightmarish.
Or your marble floor that you have to roll a scissor lift over. You really want to only change those lights in the giant lobby one time in a decade or more.
Also, parking lot lights. As an electrician, I've changed a few parking lot lights in my day, and that's not something that's too fun. In fact, I spent a few days off the job after a ladder shifted on me when I was up near the top of it.
Oof.
And you're supposed to use scissor lifts when you get up there, but it's a big investment to go rent a scissor lift just to change out one light bulb. So hey, if you could get many times the lifespan in the LED light, it's worth it just there.
What is the typical lifespan ratio and same usage pattern?
It's more than triple now. I mean, now, goodness, that you're that 18-watt tube that was equivalent to the 32-watt is now 12. So the funny thing
12,000 hours.
12 watts. I'm just talking wattage.
Oh no, I was thinking in terms of lifespan.
50,000 hours is a common lifespan. Okay. Yeah,
I think the LEDs themselves are typically 100,000 hour rated, but it's the electronics that's driving them that's going to fail before.
Exactly. And a lot of those the units that are now made all integrated. There's no more like turn out your light bulb. A lot of the downlight cans. They just come all integrated. Mm-hmm. So they're going to last a lot longer because then the manufacturers can deal with heat sinks because LEDs still do promote heat, but it's how they get rid of the heat that's designed within the system. I mean, when these big giant lights that you'd find more at like a retail shops, like at Macy's, the PAR 38, these big lights that would shine, they first came all metal because that was the best heat sink. Well, then they moved into the carbon fibers and they became lighter and more efficient, and they were able to do these like heat venting away from the LED, and then they became much more design friendly and they looked great. They didn't have any glass to break. Mm-hmm. So same with the grocery stores. You now can take off those plastic yellowing diffusers everywhere because now they're made with more of like a plastic, and they won't break or shatter over a food service.
All right.
So it wasn't Betty Biodiesel who was swinging LEDs. Who was swinging LEDs?
It was the LED lady. I walked around with a card early days, like I'm the LED lady. Even if I don't know much about LEDs, I'm just going to step into this industry and learn what I need to learn. And the manufacturers and the electricians, the guys on the job that I worked with really taught me. There was, I'd had a few people ask me later on, well, how do you learn about this? Is there a website I can go to? It's like, no, there's just step in, figure it out. And I had some great people along the way.
There's 1,000 websites you can go
to.
Yeah,
exactly.
And they'll all say something different.
Pretty much. But my moment in the industry was when our buddy John Schaefer called me up and said, hey, we've got this rewrite on the Real Good source book. And we've got this whole section on lighting in here. And I cracked the thing open and I'm reading it. I'm like, fluorescent. And I just soon realized there was no editing to this section. It just had to get rewritten. We had to talk about color rendering and beam spread and just some basics of what lighting was. And then we can talk about the technology and the life savings. And, if you cracked open that book now, you'd see data from 2 or 3 years ago. And now the LEDs are just, like you said, they're hard to find a good incandescent because they're now shoved down the ways in the stores.
So, the incentives that were available for LEDs, what type of incentives?
Big, just like the solar. They came out when the LEDs at that time were $90 a tube. You had to have very aggressive rebates. And what's interesting about rebates is we actually pay for them as the public purpose program. Anyone wants to ever figure out that on their bill, we all pay for them because
it's a surcharge on the utility bill?
It's a surcharge.
Just like the solar's rebate in California was too.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the state of California has seen a lot of population growth. However, we've been able to remain flat on our energy growth, and that's because of rebates and incentives mostly because we don't want to build more power plants.
Well, one of our incentives was we have higher than average electricity prices.
Exactly. Higher than average electricity prices.
That's intentional, actually.
Yep. And I always said you want to get your money back, to companies that didn't quite know, here's your $50,000 project, here's your, $12,000 rebate, and now here's your 5-year payback time, and you're a grocery store who also wants the quality of the light on whatever food products they've got below. That was pretty much a no-brainer for a lot of local grocery stores.
So the biggest incentive wasn't a check that someone would write to you, is that you didn't have to write as many checks or as big a checks to your utility.
Or maintain your lights over time. You got to get up on the scissor lift. And
I remember riding the parking garage elevator at San Francisco Airport, and on my thinning top of my head, feeling the heat of the incandescents.
Oh, yeah.
And there were like an array of 12 incandescents in this elevator ceiling shining down. And this thing is on 24 hours a day. And I quickly crunched the numbers in my head, walking the terminal, how fast the payback would be on that application. And the hysterical thing was when I came home and took the same elevator back to my car, they had replaced the bulbs
with LEDs.
Yeah,
that fast.
So you didn't need to put on a hat now or anything like that?
No, but I was just not able to believe that a bean counter hadn't caught that.
Yeah.
It was just a huge waste.
Oh, I walked into
money.
many and still do, but not as many. Usually grocery stores, I always said, it's not a matter of if they're going to change LED, it's a matter of when.
Yeah,
it's it's when
saving money now. Or?
Hotels were really late too. They were an outfit that had lights on 24/7,
and one of the big challenges there, to a lot of their credit, they wanted warmer lights, and LEDs were not quite there yet. But then they started figuring out how to really get that phosphor mix dialed in and made it happen.
Yeah, you can finally get them just about any color and any format. You need a little tiny light for that weird fan that someone bought a long time. You can get them now. I don't know of any LEDs that I've wanted that I haven't been able to find anymore. Even just go down to Friedman Brothers in Ukiah or somewhere like that, and they have a whole display of all kinds of different ones that are actually lit. You can see their color quality. It's definitely hit mainstream.
Yes. In fact, our tiny home, I'm no longer the LED lady. I left that industry for about mid 2017 for my sights set on the laptop lifestyle. And we were there shopping for our tiny home lights. And I ended up buying them, at the big box store, Home Depot, actually, in the local area, because they just had the best quality, because I knew what I was looking for. I want the color rendering. I wanted the options to
the
toggle
LED lady
them.
knows what it's
Exactly. But there was no rebate, because the rebate already happens at the top.
Wait a minute. The lumens per watt ratio is horrible on this one.
I know, right? That's what we should have been teaching people, lumens all this time, not wattage.
Well, no, lumens per watt. That's your important measure.
So there are government incentives for LEDs, but it's going in at the manufacturer scale?
Yeah, if you're a resident, you wouldn't have to put in the paperwork and all that stuff. It already happens at the manufacturer level, down to the distributor, and then you get your light for the $2 or
so that means it's cheaper for consumers.
Exactly.
Okay.
With commercial, there is some paperwork, and nowadays though the lights are so more reasonable that it's not even worth doing the rebate. It's just not there anymore, because the prices, the semiconductor industry created more efficiency, and the LED lighting created more efficiency. Those two worlds are tapping each other.
Production volume created lower prices.
So it's another success story for the
another
activists.
Success, right?
Nice. So we got
a bigger success than the biodiesel.
Well, I don't know. The biodiesel is a huge success, because before all this activism stuff, I mean, when was Exxon or Chevron going to put biodiesel into their mix?
Yeah.
It had to get known. It had to create this market for it.
I'll claim a little bit of that slice of pie when I see that B5 at the pump. For the B100 in our hearts, we're like, yeah, B100, but B5 across the country?
It's way more than a handful of hippies with B100.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Well, and Texan country singers.
Right. Yeah. There we go. We got the Willie Nelson. We got Woody Harrelson, Daryl Hannah. All those guys were really behind the biofuels world. I'm waiting for the celebrity that's like, tiny homes rock. And I own one in my backyard.
So do you have a persona that's pushing tiny homes yet?
I don't have a tiny home persona, but I do have Lindsay, the Go Live girl. And we are currently live streaming here in the station. I know as people are listening to this, they can also go to the Lindsay Wood feed on Facebook. And we're now just like, and I even made the hashtag Renewable Energy Hour on Instagram today.
And that means there's like a symbol?
Yes, there's
Or
anyone
what does
out there
mean?
hashtagging hashtag Renewable Energy Hour, then it will show up with my post.
Hashtagged.
We're hashtagged.
That's not the hash that we talk about here
No.
usually.
I've heard the term forever. I'm not sure I've ever seen a hashtag.
Doug, welcome to the world of the millennials. The experience economy is alive and well. We are loving our experiences. You know, the kids these days are into the bus. They're not into the 2,500 square foot home. The 1950s was 1,000 square foot average home. Now it's 2,500. But we also have the ones that are like, I can live in my van, or I can live in my RV. I can live in a tiny home.
I live in a train car.
Nice.
That's not too tiny.
Or a
It's
container.
pretty big. It's a 50-foot train car.
And yet, that's still 50 foot by what? 8.5?
Nine.
Okay. So
It's still tiny.
it's still tiny. It's under your 1950s average square foot of
Yes, it
1,000.
is.
So now we got the tiny homes. What, anybody can go and build a house on a trailer, basically, and park it. I mean, you know, it's been happening for years now. What's the issue? What's the problem? I mean, you know, if you want to build a tiny house to move your teenagers outside into the driveway, what are the issues with that?
Yeah, well, I first want to give big credit to Jay Schaefer. He's called the godfather of tiny homes. And Jay, if you're listening to this, call me back. We wonder where you are.
Tumbleweed?
Tumbleweed is what he started. He's now working with Four Lights Design. But really, it's that movement. And back in Jay's days, it was, you know, the 100, 120 square foot. And ours is now in the 300 square foot. So even though it's still a tiny home, it's on the giant size of tiny homes that we created, because I live with my husband and a dog.
Version?
The what?
The fifth wheel version? Or the
Yes, exactly. We have the gooseneck that connects over to our truck, 33 feet long. Gooseneck with 8.5 feet wide, so we're within the road highway standards. But when you really get into, you know, we're about to travel and we can go to RV parks. We're part of a private campground membership. We've got them all over the country that we can go to. Of course, not all of them. You know, I have to call ahead and make sure they know we're a tiny home, because one did say, no, I'm sorry, tiny homes aren't allowed. I didn't get any deeper as to why. So there's that. And then if you want to actually live in one in your backyard, these are ones that actually look like a home. They got trim, they've got dual pane windows, they've got siding. You can't live in one unless you've had your accessory dwelling unit ordinance amended, which the city of Fresno has done, city of San Luis Obispo, and soon this tiny little town called Los Angeles is going to be allowing legalizing these movable tiny homes.
Because they've been getting in trouble for their homeless population.
Right? Yeah.
They got a severe housing crisis in all of California.
It's all about affordable housing, and up here and anywhere, actually all over the state of California, disaster relief housing as well.
So where are you going? Who are you talking to about this stuff?
So we are already talking to the city of Ukiah. We've met with the community development director, Craig Schlater. We've also met with city mayor Mo Mulholland. And we're also in communications with John McCowan's county supervisor.
Yeah, I was going to say the county supervisors probably have more impact on your possibilities than just Ukiah.
Yeah, both. I mean, obviously, Mendocino County is a large rural area. So we're looking at being on the February 20th City Council. We're going to be a lot of people showing up to talk about their support and love for tiny homes. So February 20th around 6 p.m. is when it's going to be happening in Seminary Street in Ukiah. And then we expect a big workshop to happen. There's this wonderful man, Dan Fitzpatrick, who's been on the other side, the administrator side of the world, and now he's with American Tiny House Association. He's the guy behind all the ordinance language. He can really speak the language of the cities that want to bring that to the ordinance amendment. And what's great is a lot of cities need their general plan updated. They've got the housing plans to update. So this is a perfect time to integrate the legalization of tiny homes as an amendment to the accessory dwelling unit. I know it's a lot of words there.
Is there a lot of resistance, a lot of pushback here? I mean, what is it? Just bureaucracy and building departments?
It's funny.
The way the rules are say you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't change things unless we understand a good reason.
It's not how we do things around here.
Right.
Don't know what
what's
you're trying
cool is that there's cities like San Luis Obispo and Fresno that just loved it. It moved. It went forward. They got the right kind of language. Voila. So with Ukiah, the only thing we're met with is it's a small town. There's a lot of work to be done. So it's just about resource and bandwidth. And then you get a group of people that are interested in making it happen and showing up at my house last night for legalized tiny homes in Ukiah and Mendocino County. So it's starting, and what I have to recognize is the bureaucrats are there as our, they're the public servant. We just have to speak up and say, this is what we want. Now, do we expect it? The guy asked me, Craig asked me, he's like, when do you want this? I'm like, tomorrow, of course. But, we're willing to wait and we're willing to wait in line, but we're not going to go away. We're here to share with the city council, this is what we need. There's a woman in Redwood Valley. Here's a great example. Redwood Valley, just, up in flames. She wanted to get into something that was a little more house-like than an RV. I appreciate that because I literally stayed in one recently, and they're made of plastic. They're lightweight. So on one hand, they're great. Yeah, the RV, the fifth wheel, the motorhomes. But if you really want a house and you want something to last a long time and not end up with
that has insulation,
yes, and not end up with a blue tarp over its shell down the road, then she went with the tiny home. But there's a rule that only so many years can she live in her RV or trailer on her land that got burned down, not the land, but the home, until she has to actually live in a home. So this legalization couldn't come at a better time.
Nice. So you're actually available for people to come and check out your home here in downtown Ukiah?
Yes, we have decided, my husband and I, Eric Wood, on the other side of that camera over there, bless you. Our little quick story is that,
partner.
Yes, silent partner. We engaged in a tiny home builder. We did our due diligence. We flew to Texas. We went to a tiny home jamboree, met our builder, name shall not be mentioned, because halfway through the build, they went bust on us. And so literally we're driving from Utah with a shell of a home, no interior done, basically just the shiplap on the inside, some plumbing, some electrical, and the roof was installed. That was it. Tyvek scene going down the road.
But now you're set up and you got a nice house.
But for the last 5 months, you're right. We have completed a tiny home, and we call ourselves experience-tinyhomes.org, and we've done tours. We've been to Google, we've been to Bioneers, we've been to Sausalito, and we are going to be open our home up to tours, to dances, to 5-course wine, cheese, and chocolate dinners, spa day at the tiny home, movie night without the car. It's like a drive-in without the car with these headsets that you can wear. All the kids are wearing them, these guys, like what we're wearing right now. You can listen to 3 DJs playing music, different tracks. You could have electronica, down tempo on one, and, funky grooves on the other, and all vying for our ears to listen. And that all can happen around the tiny home. That's what we're creating. Because we want to share the message in a fun way to largely the crowd of people that are going to be interested. But, this is across all age range. This is the millennials that aren't interested in the 1,000 square foot home or even the 2,500 square foot home, to the seniors that are ready for retirement, or somewhere in the middle where we're like, you know what? I want to be living the digital laptop lifestyle and take my home with me wherever I want to go.
Are you going to be available by appointment for people to come do tours? Are you doing special events in Ukiah? Or
we are going to be in Ukiah. We're going to be heading down south to Los Angeles, going over to Tucson. I think our route's going to be from here in Ukiah over to Texas. There's some really great tiny house villages, a village farm over in Austin, Texas that's going on. There's We Casa up in Colorado. I just got to see what's happening because we really want to do one here in Ukiah, or at least in Mendocino County, a tiny home village. Huh. If Colorado can do it and Texas can do it, why can't California?
You'd think we'd have one already.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a little village of them down at Real Goods. Don't they have two?
There's one.
One?
Yes, there's one.
There's a tumbleweed design. It's about 120 square feet.
Yes.
And it's actually available on Airbnb if anybody wanted to rent and stay in that. It's a neat thing.
And that's another thing. There's if you go on and type in tiny home on Airbnb, you'll find them in Colorado. You'll find them in Florida. They're growing in popularity. They're in Texas, just so people can try before they buy.
You can see how small you can go.
Exactly. A lot of them are 399 square feet. And that's the one in Texas. You can do an RV for the length of 40 square feet. 40 feet long and do up to 400 square foot.
Not so tiny house.
No, not so. But way tinier, half the size of the 1950s average home. So got to remember that when I always emphasize that when people call my house too big, I get a little, like, wait a minute.
Oh, you have other tiny house dwellers come and see yours,
or other friends that
this isn't tiny house.
It's a tiny house pissing match. My tiny house is tinier than yours.
Exactly. So, how tiny can you go? Oh yeah.
Well, so. Are we going to open up phone lines, or what do we have?
We could. I guess I'd like to just ask you to relate some ideas about your activism and what's been successful and what you wouldn't do again.
What would I do again? I'm glad I made the shift from biodiesel to LED lighting when I did. That was helpful. The thing that I often do, because I'm a muse, that's just my thing. I love to dress up. I've been dressing up since I was a kid. And so that
she's a great MC.
That playful character of Betty Biodiesel or the LED lady, I turn to more of the camera and microphone, work at different light conferences around the country. And I would say the activist really has to come from a passion that you have. Mine was for the planet. I had a near-death experience in Asia and came out of that in 2001. It was like, all right, that's it. Sustainability for the rest of my life. And it was something that held strong. And then, things are shifting, obviously. But now with the tiny home, I got the biodiesel truck, or at least the diesel truck I can put biodiesel in. I got the solar on the roof, and I got the LED lights inside. And I've got a whole zero waste habit using bottle bricks. That's a whole nother conversation.
Next phase. The bottle brick lady.
All live streaming.
No, it'll be Mrs. Bottle Brick.
Mrs. Bottle Brick.
Mrs. Bottle Brick, yes.
Exactly. And it's a lifestyle. It's like, choosing to eat organic food and just kind of like, what's your next thing that you're working on? What's the next thing that you can add to your life? Because when you try to do it all at once, it usually flops and doesn't work. But, what food are you putting in your body? What cars are you driving? Are you trip linking? Are you driving a bunch of different ways? Are you carpooling? Nowadays we got car shares. Kids are growing up in a time when the largest hotel chain does not own their own hotels, Airbnb. When the largest car, companies do not own their own fleet, Lyft and Uber and all that. So we're growing up in the experience economy. People want experiences. And I think what's important is we realize that the largest experience we're having is the climate we live in. It's why we want to go solar. It's why we want to put LEDs in our homes, like crazy, because they're available. Solar, like you just said, is available. LEDs are available. Like if they're not in your home right now and you're still running on fluorescent and incandescent, like, oh my. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Don't go and throw away all your fluorescents, but when they die, replace them with LEDs.
Move out of that mansion.
The LEDs are better, but there's still not a huge difference between their efficiency.
I did some math. I did some math. I will say this. I did some math against an MR16, which is a halogen, versus the LED that a store did not want to change. And literally the payback was 5 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they would last
crazy,
for years.
But the halogen's an incandescent, not a fluorescent.
Correct. Correct. You're right.
There's a no-brainer
Yes.
on the incandescence.
Yes. But I will say, anyone using fluorescents and you break that,
Right.
you've got the mercury problem. And anyone with kids around, that stuff just happens. And you don't want to do that. So there's another reason besides the energy. And the good news is right now, there's collection centers that actually take care of that mercury. You got to bring it back to the
in
hardware.
California.
Yes, in California. I don't know about other countries or other states.
No, not
countries.
most
Other
states.
countries
You
too.
throw
The other
your
49
most states. You
countries.
throw your
Oh my.
your mercury into the landfill. But I must say it's an awfully small amount of mercury. Don't freak out if you break your fluorescent.
Good to know.
Your exposure is about the same cleaning it up as eating a can of tuna fish.
Oh my.
So,
Which is not saying much for the state of
Right.
mercury in our tuna.
No.
And that's all coming from coal burning, which would all be reduced with higher efficiency appliances like LEDs and smaller houses. And
Yeah, I wonder.
and the petrol is not the coal, not the mercury source, but does seem to be the source of a lot of wars.
Clean living as best you can. That would be the thing that fuels my activism. Constant attention to how I and my behaviors in my day to day are affecting the world.
Let's take calls. We have a number of callers trying to call in. If you want to join the conversation here on the Renewable Energy Hour, it's 895-2448, and I hope this person has hung on through their long hold. Hello, caller. Are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm so excited to hear your program. I'm calling from Lake County, where at this very moment, the supervisors are looking at our ordinance for alternative-sized housing, including tiny houses, and I'm wondering how to get in touch with your guest to get her excitement and information here in Lake County to our supervisors and our planners so they get the ordinance right.
All right, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I'll just spell it out. It's Lindsay at experiencetinyhomes.org, Lindsay at experiencetinyhomes.org.
All run together.
All run together. Yeah, no spaces. I can give my number, 415-378-8398. Love to connect with you because Dan Fitzpatrick, who's based in Fresno and who basically got City of Fresno to pass the ordinance amendment, there's a 12-minute video. Actually, I have a legalized tiny homes toolkit that I've been putting together. It's in a Google Drive, and I can send it out to you. It's got all the information that anyone at the city or county level would need, including a 12-minute video of Dan giving a presentation to the city of San Diego. So it's actually got everything you need in that 12 minutes. Very helpful. And when he comes up, we're looking at May or so. We'd like to put out a big workshop call out for people to come, and that could include the Lake County officials as well.
They may need it sooner than that. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we might need you guys sooner. Is it possible for you to swing down to see us anytime soon?
Absolutely, anytime's possible. I'm here in Ukiah. I'm right over the hill.
say that phone number one more time.
Yeah, 415-378-8398.
I'm so old school.
Well, it's funny. I actually had to put it on Do Not Disturb because we're live streaming with that same phone right now. But once it's done, once the show is done, that phone is ready to receive your message, and I'll get back to you.
Awesome. And your website again is Lindsay at experiencetinyhome.com.
That was actually my email address, and it's just experiencetinyhomes.org. Experiencetinyhomes.org.
And it's homes, plural.
Yeah.
Homes, plural. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
thanks for the call.
Bye-bye.
Lake County, legalize. Woohoo!
Legalize it.
Well, we are coming down to the wire. I haven't seen Jamie walk in, who's coming up right after the Renewable Energy Hour with Radio Rama. He is here? Cool. All right. So
There's a face for Jamie.
There's a face for Jamie. Radio
Hi,
Graham.
Jamie.
So we just got a minute left here, and why don't you give out your Facebook name, your
All the
website,
stuff.
your
There's
email,
so many ways to
your
connect
phone
with
number.
people now. It's crazy.
If you want people calling you.
Oh, yeah, I'm all about it. So Lindsay Wood, LindsayWood on Facebook. That's the personal page. That's where this live stream will be replayed on there. And then we've also got Experience Tiny Homes on Facebook. We've got experiencetinyhomes.org on the web. We've got Experience Tiny Homes on Instagram. There's just so many places. But Lindsay at experiencetinyhomes.org would be the place. We're going to be doing all kinds of fun events as we roll around the country.
Thanks for coming, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Alex.
Hey, you're welcome. Take care.
Good to see
Thanks
you,
for joining us.
Doug.
Good to see you.
Face to
Yes,
face.
good to bring you finally to the studio and experience the penthouse level of the skyscraper here in Philo.
Hashtag Renewable Energy Hour, Wednesdays.
I have to learn what a hashtag really is.
Old dinosaurs.
Well, coming right up is Pulse of the Planet and then Radiogram right after that. You're listening to KZYX Philo, 90.7 FM, KZYZ Williston, Ukiah, 91.5 FM, and Fort Bragg at 88.1. Alex, we'll be talking in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you.
Grab it. All right. We did it. This is the place. And KZYX, they share all kinds of wonderful news feeds, NPR, Democracy Now! And I'm really excited to have been here with Alex. Yay.
Hey.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Check it out. We got all kinds of people. We got my dad out, Leisha, awesome, Richard, Eric, Teresa, Lisa,
Your
Chris,
dad. Your dad.
Grace, Jean, Dan,
All the people
Derek.
watching.
Yeah, we got some peeps.
Yeah.
Yay,
About 6
Amy.
now, but at one point there was 11. Are you still filming?
We're still live streaming. This is live, Doug. Just as live as this guy was. He actually taught me about solar in a week.
How many years ago was that?
That was 2004.
2004. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
he taught a
14 years
portion
ago.
of a permaculture design course, which talked about gray water and solar and all kinds of great stuff.
it wasn't a
He was
straight-up
the
solar
teacher.
class.
No, you were
Alright.
just the one day with Doug.
2004.
And my mind went with solar. And Alex is rocking the solar as well. So that's where these guys
You
have
took your first
the
solar
renewable
classes from me,
energy
too.
hour.
Now I learned from you.
All right, you guys, thank you so much if you're watching the replay. Give a shout out to Experience Tiny Homes because we are coming to you. Tell me, what was your takeaway from the show? Would love to hear about that. All right, have a great night.